Welcome to the Walnut Creek CERT Disaster Preparedness Unit and the Animal Preparedness Unit.
Safety is our number one priority. If you're activated and you decide that it's safe for you to come and help out within your training and capability, then we ask that you are wearing weather appropriate clothing, that you have all of your personal protective equipment. And again, on the morning of March the 18th, when we do training day, you're going to receive a CERT pack. You saw an example of it last Saturday. We always want you to have at least one communication device. We never operate alone. We are always operating as a team, and we engage in size up and situational awareness. And you're going to be learning a little bit about that tonight, but more about it in the coming sessions. And then, of course, the CERT motto is doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people, which means we're looking at a big a response that hits as many people as is possible. So you're always going to see this slide. In this unit, we want you at the end of it to be able to understand what CERT's role is when we're activated in a disaster, to understand the nature of hazards, and be able to prepare yourself and your family and your pets for disaster. We asked you to watch a video in advance of this class about the origins of CERT, and you learned that in the Mexico City earthquake back in the 80s, that there were a tremendous number of volunteers that came forward to help, but 100 of them died because they were not prepared. So to our community, we have a value. We have learned the disciplines that you're going to learn over the next few weeks. We have learned, we follow direct command, we don't go rogue, and we don't get ourselves involved in things that are hazardous to ourselves or to others. So that's a key theme for all of our classes, and it'll be a theme tonight. So if we are activated, the first thing that we do is we make sure that ourselves, our family, our own home is safe. We check on our neighbors, and then we assemble where we have been asked to assemble if we feel it's safe and we feel capable to do so. And for most of the time, that's going to be our local area command post. So once there, so on our way there, we're noting what we see in our own neighborhoods. So do we see structural damage? Do we see infrastructure problems? We note that down. We come to our command post. We meet with our command staff, debrief what we've seen, and the command staff works together to identify how do we get more information, how do we provide assistance within our capability and training. So that's how we operate. And I've told you before, there are things that we can do in non-disaster times. And indeed, Walnut Creek CERT has never been activated for a natural disaster, but we've done a lot of things like wellness checks, and most recently helping with the flooding. And as Bruce mentioned earlier, Lieutenant Jauer mentioned earlier, the missing person searches. So there's a lot we can do, including what we're doing now, which is training ourselves. And then hopefully you're going to go and share this information with your neighbors and other members of the community. So then let's talk a minute about situational awareness. So I'm going to move this slide to the next one. We want you to have a mindfulness that becomes a habit, so that if you go into a new building, a new office or residence, when you're walking down the street, when you're in a parking structure, that you're always being mindful of everything around you, that you know where your exits are, you know where you might seek cover, you know where there might be fire extinguishers. You're watching the people around you. Is there anybody manifesting behavior that makes you uncomfortable? And that doesn't mean that that we're encouraging you to lead a paranoid life, or that we're suggesting that we should categorize people and stereotype them and be afraid of people. No, what we're talking about is looking at behaviors that people are manifesting that may make you feel uncomfortable, and listening to that little voice. But the bottom line is, if we lead a more mindful life, is particularly in in times where we aren't familiar, we're in locations or places where we're not familiar, then maybe during a disaster, when we do come across, when we're fearful, when there are situations beyond our control, we might have a more calm approach, and we might have greater opportunities for escape or for protection, because it's become just a natural course for us to know how we're going to get out. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk a lot about disasters, and FEMA characterizes them as natural or technological and accidental, or terrorism. So let's take a look at that. So natural disasters are as you would think they would be, all those things: floods, volcanoes, earthquakes, inclement, we're experiencing more extreme weather. So it's what you would expect, and what many of us have experienced. Technological and accidental are things like, refinery accidents, or gas line problems like the Kinder Morgan situation, hazardous material spills, spontaneous building collapse, and then, of course, terrorism. Now, Lieutenant Jauer mentioned that, I think it's on March the 7th, you will receive instruction on CERT roll with regard to terrorism. And, here's a preview. Our job is, like every other citizen, to report if we see something wrong or to run. But that class is being taught in part by Lieutenant Jauer and in part by Don Prosnitz, who is a Walnut Creek CERT and who has expertise in homeland security. He's a physicist and a very interesting speaker on this topic, but he's going to talk to you more about terrorism and the nature of its weapons and how it induces fear and creates chaos. So those are the various kinds of disasters. And what they have in common is they're relatively unexpected, which does not mean you can't prepare, but you're probably going to be surprised by them. Professional first responders are going to be overwhelmed, and they are inherently very dangerous. So let's take a minute, and I would like to build out, to have us talk together before I get to this. I would like to do a new share. Hang on, give me a second. I would like to share with you, I want us all to just think for a minute about a disaster that we either personally or someone very close to us has been involved in, has directly been impacted in. And let's talk about the impact on the infrastructure that they experienced. So let me share my screen again. And let's just talk ourselves through it. So here are those types of disaster. So earthquake, all those natural disasters, those technological and accidental disasters, terrorism types. And then, if you can see, I've listed some of the kinds of infrastructure that holds our community up. So transportation modes, bridges, roads, structures, buildings, hospitals, communications capability, water distribution system, electrical distribution system, fuel distribution system, the availability of a workforce, general supply chain, ability to have food. And what I'd like to do is have you think about that time. Maybe you were involved, you were directly impacted by a disaster. And think about what part of the infrastructure was impacted for you. So I'll go first, and then I'll ask Peggy to go. And then that'll give you all a moment to think about it. But I lived in New Jersey for a while, and I was there when 9/11 happened. So I was impacted by terrorism. I wasn't in Manhattan when that happened, but I can tell you that it was it was terrifying being so close to it. So there was a psychological impact. But from an community infrastructure perspective, I had to travel routinely for business, and now there was a period of time where I couldn't travel for business. The airports were shut down, and then when they did open, there were armed soldiers with heavy machine guns in the airports, and you couldn't just go into Manhattan if you had a reason to go in Manhattan. The roads were blocked. So I was involved in a terrorism type disaster remotely, thank God. And the biggest impact on the infrastructure of my community was on transportation. So Peggy, have you been impacted directly by a disaster? And can you think about infrastructure that might have been impacted?
Not directly, but the 89 earthquake, the San Francisco earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
Our neighbors, our children were at preschool. We had to pick them up, and one of the parents was in San Francisco. She could not get home because her transportation was BART. So it definitely affected transportation and structures, also related to transportation. Of course, the bridge, you've got that picture there, and the Cypress Freeway structure that collapsed.
Yeah.
Double-decker freeways were taken down after that.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that my sister-in-law got married in November, and this was mid-October. I think it was the 18th or something. We couldn't go to the San Francisco airport to pick up our siblings, or my husband's siblings, but by then BART was running again. And so, in fact, she had looked at a motel in San Francisco for her wedding, and fortunately decided not to go there. So it didn't impact me directly, but there were a lot of trickle-down effects.
Yep.
And
good.
Observations that I made.
Good. Thank you. Somebody else? Anybody else briefly want to talk about a disaster they've been involved in?
Can I just add on to the Loma Prieta, because I was in San Francisco
Absolutely.
when it happened.
Yeah.
And certainly transportation was significantly impacted. Getting out of the city to go to work. I was working in Oakland at the time, was a mess. Structures, our lath and plaster apartment actually survived pretty well. The two cinder block buildings next to us, not so much. And so we were dealing with some of those individuals who didn't have any place to live at that point. Red Cross came in pretty quick, but for the first hour or so, they were kind of huddling with us. Communications, there were none. There was no cell phone. There were no landlines. You couldn't get any information out. We had a battery operated radio, but half of the stuff that was coming through on that was total hogwash. They were talking about bodies floating in the bay, and it was crazy. Water distribution, our water worked just fine, but we had no electricity for 3 days. We had no gas. There were people available because people didn't know what to do, and they were just kind of wandering around shell-shocked. And then supplies, that wasn't impacted too much. We typically keep enough food and water and stuff on hand anyway, but a lot of the stores still were able to clean up their shelves and stuff, and you can go in and get things. Good,
thank you. Somebody else?
Harris.
Yes, Harris.
I was visiting our daughter in New York City when Hurricane Sandy hit. And she lives on a 7th floor of an apartment building in downtown Manhattan. And we were there for the birth of a grandchild. And Hurricane Sandy hit, and then the rain wasn't that bad, but the flooding from that went up and along a number of the the subway tunnels. And as a result of that, they managed to lose electric power for the lower half of Manhattan.
Yes.
And we were on the 7th floor up with a newborn baby.
Hmm.
And at that point, I figured that may not happen yet, but without the power, they're gonna not be able to pump the water up to the 7th floor very long. So we plugged up the bathtub and filled up a half of the bathtub with water. And we were using some flashlights that we had with us. And sure enough, about an hour later, besides the electricity being out, the water was cut off.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Okay.
used the water in the bathtub so we could flush the toilets.
Sure.
But again, part of the problem was when you lost that power, and subsequently you lose the water in the high-rise buildings,
Right.
and then after a day or two, you end up with sanitation problems because there's no way to get rid of the waste.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Harris. That's
Mhm.
Hurricane
You'd
Sandy,
like
not
to have
fun.
an older one?
Sure, Alma, but I'm trying to get to this. Yeah. Okay. Now somebody, folks, if you could mute yourself if you're not speaking, I'm getting feedback. I don't know why, but okay, go ahead, Alma.
My experience of a disaster is much older than any of yours. I'm thinking of the beginning of World War II, when the town where we lived, in fact, our very house was being bombed. And I remember from that experience that there are several things that you can do if you need to escape very fast. Put a sheet on the floor, pile into it your most precious possessions, tie the four corners together, get on your bicycle and get out of there. That's what we did. We did manage to escape with our lives and our most precious things. Our house was destroyed.
Thank you, Alma. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. Al, I see in the chat you asked, does terrorism count? Yes, terrorism is indeed, active shooter is a terrorist event. Is there anybody else that has a different kind of disaster that they would like to share?
I'd like to share something. This is Alan.
Thank you. Go for it. And what we're looking for is an impact on transportation. So what's the disaster? I mean, an impact on
The
infrastructure.
disaster was that I was knocked off of a bridge during a flash flood in my car.
Good.
Okay.
Yes.
And that couldn't see it coming. This happened in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, in fact. And of course, transportation was immediately impacted. My transportation.
Sure.
And transportation, of course, of other people who were on that road.
Right.
But and then communications was, I had no communication. Okay. The only communication I had was my yelling voice, my voice, help.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And eventually that, that yielded it. I was saved by the fire department that was notified.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you.
I wanted to add on the Hurricane Sandy,
Yes.
the subways were shut down,
Yes.
and also a number of the bridges and roads going in and out were also shut down because there was no power, and in a number of cases there was flooding.
Definitely. Now here's one more disaster. Did anybody remember this little thing? I don't know. That little disaster, did anybody have any impact? What did our community have as impacts with that disaster? Pandemic.
Public transportation was shut down.
Sorry, what?
Public transportation was shut down.
Yep. And there were many buildings we couldn't get into. And there was problems with workforce.
Grocery
Hospitals
supply
were
chain issues in the grocery stores.
Supply chain issues.
hospitals were overcrowded, and we were building outdoor MASH like tents to accommodate people.
God bless you for doing that. Thank you very much. Yeah. So bottom line is there are significant impacts to our community when there is a disaster. So thank you all for sharing that. Let me get back to our
Margaret, I apologize. My phone died and I had to find the link again. I was going to mention, I haven't really been impacted directly other than once the pandemic started because I work in a hospital, but my mom, before she died, was on an appliance that you had to plug in to stay alive.
Yes.
And so they're in the Midwest. So if tornadoes get bad enough, the power will go out. And that's something to think about. There are people in the community that need their oxygen or need their heart pump to be turned on. And
Absolutely.
those are people that need, like the fire department has to go check on them or bring them a portable generator. I don't know if CERT ever ends up being the people that help with that, but
yeah. So in 2019 or 2020, we had those rolling power outages and extreme heat. And so we were partnered with the Walnut Creek Police Force, and they had the PG&E list of people who voluntarily sign up to advise that they are in need if there are ever emergencies, electrical emergencies. And we went house to house and did wellness checks. So that is an impact. And more frequently, we are experiencing, due to extreme weather, and we'll talk about this in a second, but the rolling power shutoffs really have an impact on us. So let's see if there's something we missed. So we absolutely hit that transportation is often impacted when there is a disaster, and that we have to worry also about major structures, major roadways, bridges, and the availability of supplies. And communications. No one mentioned wildfire. I know Erica, who's on the line, has participated in many a wildfire, and she will tell you as a responder that cell towers burn, and it's possible that communications may be significantly impacted in a major disaster. Several of you mentioned availability of fresh water. And I'm going to show you in a few slides what the potential impact for water might be in our community. But just remember that not only is residential water not available when we have some certain disasters, but also that means no water for firefighting. Several of you talked about an absence of electricity, which means no cash, no gas, no communications, no ability to, Harris mentioned, water being pumped, fuel systems. It's possible that there could be secondary disasters as a result of hazardous material spills, in addition to fuel shortages. And then, of course, our emergency personnel, as Amy mentioned, are often the first impacted and in very, very increasingly short supply. So, you know, we have to, in our community, we have to worry about a variety of hazardous situations that can impact ourselves and our communities. And so I think last Saturday I mentioned to you that every city has an emergency management plan. The city of Walnut Creek has one. All you have to do is Google emergency management plan, city of Walnut Creek. It should bring you to a January 2020 document that outlines, there's an assessment that the city does, identifying, you know, what kinds of disasters have we had historically. So you can see in Walnut Creek, we've had a lot of extreme weather and damage, floods and landslides due to extreme weather. And then they have to do an assessment of the kinds of disasters that might be, you know, forthcoming for us. And of course, earthquake is number one, landslides is number two because of the topography we're in, but also because of severe weather and flooding, which can also, earthquake can create landslide, floods can create landslides. So these are the things that are the most, should be top of mind for us as citizens as we think about preparing ourselves. So let's talk about that big one, earthquake. And we'll talk a little bit about Turkey just for a second, because it's such a terrible devastation there. But closer to home, this is a map that shows the major earthquake faults that are in our area, and Walnut Creek is right around here where my cursor is. So of course we have the Green Valley Concord Fault, and that has had a few earthquakes in it in the past 10 years, but the probability, the US Geological Service does a continuous probability analysis. And the last time they did it and published a major document was 2014. And they said there's a 72% probability of a 6.7 or greater earthquake between 2014 and 2043 in the San Francisco Bay Area. Most of our risk is going to come probably from the Hayward Fault. That Hayward Fault, when there is a significant earthquake, has tremendous impact because there's a huge population living along the Hayward Fault. We are going to get some attendant shaking, and I'll show you the shaking map in a minute. But the Hayward Fault also has a lot of possibility for liquefaction. So it's a huge risk. So all of these combined represent a pretty significant risk in the next 25 years or so. There's a picture from the Napa earthquake. This is just a shaking video. You know, if you've been involved in an earthquake before, you know the possibility for significant shaking and the attendant damage that can happen with that. Not fun. So this is the shaking map for our area. So here we are, Walnut Creek. So here is that Hayward Fault. So we are going to be in an area, red signifies the darker the red, the more intense the shaking. So we're in a pretty high shaking, heavy shaking area. Yes, Peggy underscored that there's a lot of hospitals along the Hayward Fault. Okay, so the earthquake, the California Earthquake Authority, who is the group that provides access to earthquake insurance, and later on Peggy's going to talk about the variety of things we can do to help lessen our impact. And you know, every person has to make their own assessment on earthquake insurance because it just depends on who owns the house, but and how much you're into it. But the expectation, and I want to draw your attention, we're going to keep hammering on you about the importance of properly storing water, because they anticipate that in Alameda and Contra Costa County along the Hayward Fault, it might take several months to restore water service. Now, that doesn't mean that FEMA's not going to come in and truck in water, but you have to ask yourself, do I want to be standing in line to get an allocation of water? So pretty significant, compelling reason to prepare. A note about aftershocks. Everybody knows that when there are earthquakes, there are aftershocks, and there are various scientific models that can help us to understand the magnitude of aftershocks that might be coming. And aftershocks create their own ripples. So they can happen days, weeks, months, years after an initial shock. And if an aftershock is greater than the initial earthquake, then the scientists reassess, and that becomes the major earthquake, and the prior earthquake is a foreshock. So the great earthquake of San Francisco, by the way, the first earthquake hit at like 5:12 a.m. and they thought that was the big earthquake. And then about 20 seconds later, a larger earthquake happened. So the first quake in 1906 was a foreshock. So here's a little snapshot of what happened in Turkey. So they had the initial 7.8. And then on that same day, they started having these tremendous aftershocks. And even so today, they had several 5.0 and greater. There was a 5.0, a 4.2, a 5.3. So those people are still suffering with the aftershocks related to that earthquake. But you can say to yourself, if I know aftershocks are coming, and I know that there is some amount of time between aftershocks, how can I use my time effectively? Okay, so we know that structural instability is one of the primary impacts of earthquake, but you know that fire can ensue when there is when there are hazardous materials that leak in an earthquake, and you know we are lucky that in around 1979 our building codes in California were improved. So homes and structures that were created after 1979 are up to a code of standard that helps with their durability in an earthquake. Before that, structures need to be retrofit. I don't know if you ever go to the little town of Benicia, but there are some beautiful little historic little one-story shops, but there's a little sign outside that says, you know, not safe for an earthquake. That is also a result of our laws that that say that if it's a pre-1979 building and it has not been retrofitted and it is unreinforced masonry, then they have to post that there is a warning. So lots of implications of where we are in the event of an earthquake. And you know, we can't pick where we're going to be when a big earthquake happens. So you have to say to yourself, every place I go, if I have an elderly parent in assisted living, if I have a child living in an apartment building or a college, do I know those buildings that I go to frequently? Do I know where I would shut off the gas? Do I know how we would escape? And do I feel confident that my own home has been inspected and that I feel confident that it's going to sustain itself? Unfortunately, in Turkey and Syria, they have been struggling for years. You know, they know that they are in an area that is on top of major tectonic plate action, but they have struggled to get any kind of construction compliance. The amount of sand sometimes in the construction or the lack of infrastructure really is just devastating, as we're beginning to see. So all this to say, important to understand the risks and to prepare. So now that we understand the risks, I'm going to turn it over to Peggy, and Peggy's going to talk about mitigation and about preparedness. Jeff mentioned that the Kinder Morgan pipeline explosion on Broadway about 10 years ago was a local disaster. Yep.
Okay, these are some of the things we can expect to have problems from at our own houses. This faulty wiring, etc. My husband has been replacing all of the on and off switches in our house that are of a certain brand, and our house is only 27 years old. The plastic has cracked in the back of those switches. So he's been replacing them, things like that. And I know what happened. He went to turn a light on and poof, there was a spark or a flash, and the circuit went out. So something like that happens, do something about it. Okay, like Margaret suggested you do, your pre-work was to sign up for warning systems. And so at least you'll know what's going on. Now, one of the things that FEMA has mentioned is that most injuries in an earthquake are caused by people trying to walk or run during shaking, and if from that or being hit by falling, sliding, or flying household items. Some of the other stuff Margaret has mentioned address specific needs for yourself and people you know how to take care of yourself. Really be aggressive about having your plan and putting it in place and practicing it. Some of the elements of your plan are listed here. One of the things my children do know, even though we haven't practiced our plan or anything in years, they know who to call who's living out of state. And this next to last one, do you have cash? If you only have a $20 bill or $20 bills, that's the lowest amount of money you have, and you want to buy a water bottle, it's going to cost you $20. So be sure you have small change. The last one, practice your plan. The thing to think about is if the earthquake hits and you've got an elderly, disabled or not quite, or mobility challenged person, or perhaps one with dementia at home, what are you going to do to make sure that that person gets cared for? So that should be in your plan too. And also, if you have kids at home, you've gone out to the grocery store, something like that, you've got kids at home, over 12, of course. What is your plan for that? If you can't get back to them, they are. And Margaret did tell me that those systems are trying to be more appropriate to where the earthquake is and where they're sending that information to. I think we've already talked about go bags and disaster supply kits that have to be put in, it need to be in separate places so that you can get to them. No matter what is blocked off, you can still get to some emergency equipment. We know about the other thing is tell your neighbors to get signed up for the community warning system, the state and the local systems, so that they can be aware of what's going on as well. And then now if a disaster happens, make sure you check with verified sources, which would include Earthquake Warning California, the City of Walnut Creek, and Contra Costa counties, not Instagram, Facebook, others like that. Use verified sources. If you are told to evacuate, please do so. In Katrina, a lot of people died because they refused to evacuate when they were told to, but they were putting rescuers at risk. And as we know, the number of rescuers is a lot lower than the number of potential victims. And you really don't want to be putting rescuers at risk. So also tell your neighbors. If you're told to get out, get out. And it used to, in Katrina, the problem was animals. People would not leave their animals behind. And as a result, we have the animals program. And as you know, Erica is going to talk about that later on today. Okay, here's some more sources for alerts, information about some apps you can get, the FEMA, the Pulse Point, and Red Cross emergency apps, government, social media, verifiable information. We're going to talk about this at the end if we have time. I will give you a sense. Now, if you have an older house, there are things you can do to mitigate your risk. We're talking flood risk, earthquake risk, others as well. And the safe room is if you have to be inside and you're worried about the environment around you, to have a place that's, if possible, doesn't have windows that can leak the outside air in. Members will move back and forth, jiggle back and forth, and finally the house will settle down on one side and then settle itself down on the other side. Okay, they're not only earthquakes, but we also have fires, landslides, and wildfires. And I had trouble reading this slide to start with, but the point is you got to be able to open it from the inside or you're trapped. Bolt down. Now this is one heck of a good job bolting down this water heater. Also, I love this idea of securing cabinet doors with child-proof fasteners. I do worry about my china all coming out during an earthquake in North Ridge earthquake. We were in Southern California for that. And one of the fellows I used to work with told me every single item of glass in his house, including his television screen, broke during that earthquake. It was there was sheer movement, it meant it went up and down, and everything glass was destroyed. He was close to the center, what do you call it? Anyway, he was close to where the earthquake actually happened. But make sure you know where all your shutoffs are, and do not shut off your gas unless you smell gas or see a line broken, because you'll have to wait for the power company or for the gas company to come and turn it on, and you might have to wait. Bookshelves, we have our bookshelves and our dining room hutch secured, have shoes and a flashlight in a bag tied to the bed leg. Okay, what did we talk about? Develop a home earthquake plan. I don't know if you've already been told this, but this is probably the single most important thing I learned from CERT when I took it in 2008. If your tank is less than half full, fill it up. Duck, cover, and hold means hold on to that table so it doesn't dance away from you and no longer provide protection for you. But stay in a big, clear area if possible. And try not to be walking around or running for cover during that earthquake. All of these things are things you can do for yourself. Helping the neighbors. When the earthquake happens, before you go to your command post, at least find out how the neighbors are doing and decide whether or not you want to go to the command post or you want to help your neighbors first. Okay, when the earthquake or the disaster happens, assess your situation, protect yourself, and as the class used to say, sing, do I stay or do I go? And okay, shelter in place. So this is the safe room that was discussed earlier. And we don't have to stay for several days, just several hours. Or for an extended stay. One of the things to keep in mind with the community shelter is the food that they have is just going to be stuff that could have salt, could have snack type items. And if you want to find out what kind of things to put in your Go Kit, look at ready.gov. And of course, choose foods that you like. Don't just buy something off the shelf that you think will be good for you, because some of this stuff tastes like sawdust. So make sure that you have the right kind of food in your go bag. And I think Margaret talked about this, is water service. We may be without it for a very long time. This type of water bottle Probably not very good for long-term use. Yeah, plastic will degrade. Lamarinda CERT information, the kind of water you can get, 55-gallon drums, other accessories, and Walnut Creek CERT, if we recommend people, they say they're connected with Walnut Creek. You say you're connected with Walnut Creek CERT. They will give us some money. Communication. This might be, it might be hard to, as we talked about before, cell towers may be down, electricity may be down. Do we have time for our exercise, Margaret?
I think since Bruce and since Lieutenant Jarrer and Sergeant Davis stopped in to say hello, I don't think we have time for that. But I would suggest that as a homework assignment, everybody just take a look around your house and say, what's the one thing that I'm going to do to mitigate glass where where I or my family have to walk to get out when an earthquake strikes? Do I have enough water stored? Do I have water stored in a way that is that's going to last a very long time without having to have the plastic degrade in a year, or without having to refresh it constantly, which is a big expense? Do I have a sufficient amount of food and other materials to keep me ready? Do I have a communication plan? And let's just make sure that you're not sitting on these ideas, but in fact, you take the opportunity to take action.
Thank you, Margaret. So I think we can go ahead and go on to the next slide. We're just basically going to run over what we have for animal response with regards to CERT. Our objectives, as you see, it's basically your responder, you as a CERT responder, your safety when encountering and handling animals out in the field. We'll run through some of the animal operation procedures, and then in the end, just talk about for your personal pet preparedness. Though I will say that ready.gov site that was talked about before, a really good site for you to do your own planning. You can do it online, and you can actually tailor a whole plan for your family and print it out. So it's really kind of cool. It's a really good site. So CERTs, being out in the field, you are definitely going to encounter animals. And as you can see here, 67% of US households, there is some kind of animal in the household. And in your search and rescue operation, you're definitely going to meet up with a few of them. So I think when you're looking at pets and the impact with the people in disaster, a lot of it goes back to Hurricane Katrina, because as stated before, a lot of people refuse to leave with their pets, or those that left with their pets were spending time sneaking back in so they can get their pets. So there were a lot of secondary issues that occurred during Hurricane Katrina when people could not evacuate with their pets. So that's kind of when the Pets Act was enacted after that. And as that was enacted, we saw later on, the basis of it is if you're told to evacuate, you will bring your pet with you. Now, each of the groups or responding areas, of course, need to figure out how they're going to accommodate that, but they've been slowly working on that for the last decade, and things have definitely gotten better. And if you look at it with regards to the comparison of Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Harvey, as you see between these two here, people, they went with their animals. Things went a lot smoother. We heard from other first responders what a big change between 2005 in fighting with people trying to leave without their pets, where in 2017 leaving with their pets, everything was just went a lot smoother with regards to people getting out and people actually evacuating. So it went rather well there. But as a CERT, you really need to understand how to be safe around the animals. So your safety is number one when out there. And you're not out there really to rescue the animals. You're out there to help with the people, but you have to be aware of any animals that could be around and what's going on before you might even start any of your CERT tasks. You need to do that. So again, why CERTs train in animal handling? So that when people are evacuating, we know what's going on there. It also helps reduce the trauma from both an animal perspective, but also the human perspective. It's a lot less stress when they know they have their animals with them. Following the disaster, you know, abandoned, stressed animals, that creates other secondary risks for responders. And again, like talking with Katrina, there were people sneaking back in, trying to rescue their animals on their own. And just some of them created secondary disasters in regards to that. So we had disasters within the disasters on there. And you never know with pets roaming freely what's going to happen with regards to that. So the whole thing with the animals is the pets matter because the people matter. When you're out in the field approaching an unknown animal, you're really looking at either a non-aggressive friendly animal, you're looking at one that could be aggressive, or you're looking at a frightful animal. So when you're coming up against one that's non-aggressive, what you want to do is size up that situation. What is your objective? What it is you want to accomplish? And basically you're looking at that whole thing, a house coming down or house on fire, something going on. House on fire, you're looking at going, you know, you're not a firefighter, you're not going into that house, so you can see what you could do from the outside, you won't be going in. But when you're looking at something where you are able to go into the house, you need to look at whether or not there's an animal involved. So you're going to look around to see if there are maybe bowls of water or food being left out. And this is really specific in talking about dogs. The last thing you need to do is run up to try to help an owner who could be injured, and a dog comes around the corner and does not know who you are, and you're over their animal. So really, you want to secure that animal before you get to that owner to assist them. So again, the non-aggressive animal, what you want to do is really see if they'll come to you. That's the best thing, instead of going to the animal. See if you can call them to you. In the class that we did on Saturday, I was trying to show a lot of people how to use a slip lead. And hopefully all of you will have a slip lead in your kit. So when you're calling an animal towards you, you can use the slip lead so that you can at least get control over that animal. You want to assess whether or not you can contain that animal, what your team size is, but more importantly, who's more comfortable around approaching animals that are not aggressive and working with the animals. So you kind of want to pick who on your team is going to be doing what. And you always want to think about too, how are you escaping from there with those animals? So really, as you're approaching them, you want to have be relaxed. Don't be staring them down. Be confident. Use soft, calm voice. My mom likes to say, use baby talk. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on the animal. But as long as you're soft, you're not raising your voice, you're just talking to them, not a problem. And again, don't try to reach out. Try to get them to come to you. If you happen to see treats available, maybe utilize treats to see if they'll come. What you don't want to do is, if they do start coming over to you, to kind of loom over them or try to grab them by the collar. That's why you have a slip lead. If you try to grab an animal by a collar, you are going to get bit. So the slip lead keeps that safety down in front of you there, so you don't have to do that. Think about approaching them, looking at your body instead of a frontal approach. Approach them from the side, just sidestep towards them. And again, the slip lead to control the dog, or using a towel or a pillowcase to pick up a cat. I was showing some of you how to do that with of course, a very accommodating kitty, but I've used that with real cats myself. Works well. You do want to make sure you always have gloves and eye protection on for yourself. Wherever you can protect yourself, that's what you want to do. And once you do have that animal, don't be squeezing or really have a tight control on the leash, what you want to do is just have an, use as little restraint as needed. Just a little bit. You don't need to be forceful with those animals. If that animal turns out to be aggressive, you might be dropping that leash or lead, or putting that cat, putting that cat down, and just let them go on their own. If you are coming across an aggressive animal, don't even bother. Just document what's going on at that house and safely move on to the next one. You never want to turn your back on the animal. Just kind of calmly back away from that situation. This, I like this one in How to Greet a Dog. And this was a printout that I got from Dr. Sophia Yin. And if any of you Google her, you could probably get a copy of this free, unless, I don't know, Margaret, I think we might have these up on the website.
Yeah, I think we do have it
for
on the
them to print
website.
out.
Yeah, that's why I just let it be there.
Yeah. It's really nice because it gives you an idea, how would you react if some stranger was approaching you or doing things to you. And it kind of gives you an example of that's how the dog's going to react. And so they also show you better ways of how to do that approach and what you want to do. So I always like that presentation there. Approaching an unknown animal, again, a frightened animal, really, unless you know what you're doing, don't do anything. Basically, think of it as an aggressive animal. Don't really approach unless someone's around with you. You're going to move slowly. Again, try to get the animal to come to you and see if you can get a slip lead on it if it's a dog or another larger animal. But the aggressive animals, stay away. You want to stay away from those. Approaching and crating a cat. If the owner hopefully has that cat, you can stand the carrier so the door's up. So if you're holding the cat, you are putting that cat down into the carrier. You're not trying to shove them in sideways. You want to go down. That's the easiest way to do it. And again, have your gloves and goggles just in case. You're going to have hopefully that towel or pillowcase where you're holding that with the cat. It kind of shows you in one fluid. It talks about one fluid movement, but you're just wrapping them like that burrito. And if you're in the class on Saturday, I was kind of showing you how to wrap them in as the burrito, or using the pillowcase to get them into the pillowcase instead. So, and then there talked about the alternate with the pillowcase. So really easy. So once you have the cat in the pillowcase, this is Lisa from Concord CERT. She was helping me out. This is a cat. We were at my sister's house doing the demonstration with my sister's cat. So Lisa's never met my sister's cat before. So she just took a pillowcase, called the cat over to her, wrapped it around her. Excuse me. And you can see how she kind of picked up the cat and continued wrapping it. Just really easy pulling that cat up. So, and if you don't have the carrier, same thing. That cat's never been shoved into a pillowcase before. And that was the first time. And again, she was just there on the couch, checking out to see what we were doing. And Lisa just slowly came up, used the pillowcase around her, picked her up that way, and was holding her. Really easy way to go. Using the slip lead, again, a pre-made slip lead. Not all of them have a band that you can use on them, but a slip lead is the best thing you want to do. A 6-foot one is what I recommend. I think some of the items in your bags, excuse me, wasn't coughing until I started talking. Some of the items that you have, no, I'll see if I can push through it, Margaret. Thank you. What you want to do is make sure you have a 6-foot slip lead. And that allows you to make that larger loop or lasso to get around the dog. The 4-foot slip leads just don't give you that much. They're great if you know what you're doing, but when you don't, it doesn't give you a little extra safety having that extra 2 feet with a 6-foot lead. So what you're doing, you're just making that loop large. So you're slipping it over the dog's head without having to bend over it. You're just kind of standing next to it and putting that loop over, and then just pulling up on the leash to bring it in. Very easy to do. You don't want to pull it hard, but you can see Lisa, again, demonstrating. She was pulling that loop out. She's showing you how she's holding the end of the leash with her thumb and closing it up. So she has that on her hand, how she's holding the handle of the leash. And you can see where she had the big loop, again, where she was going towards the one dog. This was a foster dog. And again, calling the dogs up, putting it over the loop there. And then you can see in the middle on the bottom how she's holding the leash, where one hand is kind of above the dog, and then you can see where she's holding the handle. So you're really controlling the dog with as you see it, with her left hand, and she's holding the leash in her right, the handle of the leash. So they ask that you don't use a slip lead on a puppy or a very small dog. But, if you need to get control of that animal, that is what you have. That's what you have. And it's the only thing you have to do unless you're able to pick it up. Never tie the dog to an object especially with the slip lead, because that's just what it is. They'll just slip right out of it. Don't leave them unattended. So that means think of your team. If you've got an animal and you need to contain that animal, it's either someone is having to be there holding that animal, or maybe you were able to walk that animal over into a crate or another room, so then you can finish what you need to do as your search and rescue duties. Move on from there. So that's really good. What you don't want to do is let the dog pull really hard, because they may damage its throat. So again, you're talking to the dog, trying to keep it calm. And as I stated before, if that dog really becomes so frightened and it's trying to pull back with its neck, just really try to let the lead go, and you're leaving the dog behind. And again, a frightened dog could be a biter. So you want to be really careful about that. Now, what we want to do is make sure that those pets that, if we are bringing them in, they're going back to their owners when everything is said and done. So Walnut Creek CERT has a method of ensuring those owners and companion pets are identified together. And the one main thing we have is the identity band that I was showing in Saturday's class, that all you have to do is write down the address of where that animal is coming from, or if it was outside and it was the corner of Buena Vista and Gary Road, then you're writing corner Buena Vista and Gary Road. At least it gives us a general location where the animal may have come from. And then again, you're completing your documentation. Never forget that. It's always, everything that happens has to go into your documentation. You're bringing a pet in, you're leaving a pet behind, you're bringing the owners in, leaving the owners behind. You are documenting everything there. Transporting. So hopefully pet owners already have preparations for alternative care for their pets should the need arise. So think of it as disaster preparedness for that one. And hopefully you as a CERT, both the owner and the CERT driver have to feel comfortable and safe in transporting that pet in the driver's private car, if that's how we're doing it. And again, if that pet is left behind, we're documenting what's going on. One good thing might be is maybe if someone's coming in and you have that friendly pet, you're checking in with them to see if there's someone who is staying in the house or a neighbor who might be able to check on their pet instead of bringing them in. So if we are transporting animals, you want to make sure the crates are of adequate size. And really only one crate per animal, unless you have a mother and the babies, then they would go together into one crate. Keep in mind the weather and whether or not, especially in the summertime, that you have the car running with the air conditioning going on, because that is going to be a quick way to kill an animal, leaving them in that hot car. Cats, no matter what, should always be in some type of carrier. They should never be loose in a car. And if need be, the dogs could be tethered If not in a crate, but not with a slip lead, you will want to have a regular leash to try and to have that animal down. And I think that just talks about the warning, if you're transporting the pets in the hot temperatures, what it's really going to feel like. Search markings, just like for people, there's also search markings that you can do for the animals, and it goes into that same spot there. So you're just looking one dog, one cat, as you can see here, what's going on.
Erica, let me just break in, folks. When you get to the light search and rescue unit in a couple of evenings, you're going to learn that if we assess as a team, let's say your a home in your neighborhood is safe enough for us to enter. We hear somebody calling out for help. They're asking us to come in for help, and the structure is safe to go in. We use rescue markings to identify that we've gone into a home. We always document what time a team went in, what they encountered, whether there were victims inside or animals inside, and the search team and the time they entered and left. You'll learn all about this, but Erica's just saying we're going to document animals found as well as people.
Yeah, and we have our communication forms as well that we would do our documentations on. So, animal inflicted injuries. So if in your CERT duties you are injured by an animal, you definitely you're going to stop and you are going to take care of yourself. You want to get that injury taken care of, rinsed out, cleaned up before you do anything else. And especially in the case of a bite, you definitely want to find out make sure you have that information that you can from the dog, the address, where it's from, because we're going to want to follow, a follow-up might be needed in regards to rabies shots and whether or not it's up to date, because otherwise you could be going through some pretty not so fun shots to fight against rabies, just in case. If you're facing an aggressive dog, you can try basic commands such as sit, stay, or down. Think of something you could put between you and that animal. And for most of you, the one object you might have on you is what?
On the morning of the 18th, are they going to get a pack?
I don't know. If they are, yep,
they are.
Your CERT backpack. Okay, so your CERT backpack would be the best thing. You can pull that off, have that in front of you, and get that distance between you and the dog. And again, back away, don't run, because if you turn and run, you just became prey. And that dog just might take a nice little chunk out of you if you're running away from it. So I think I already went through that one. Personal pet preparedness. I think the only things you can see what's here. The only things I can add is maybe having a buddy system. You want to think about if you're not home, how are you going to have your animals cared for? What are the things that you can do to have someone come over and get your animal for you if you can't get there, if you're not home. Make sure you've got kennels, food, think of the medications that you need. I think that's really something you want to think about, that ready.gov, that will really walk you through what you need to do. And they do have a section in regards to animals in there as well. And I see a question about something like pepper spray. I don't think as a CERT you're going to be having pepper spray on you. That's not something you're going to carry as a part of your CERT duties, Margaret. I don't think we allow that.
No, we don't. I mean, you're gonna identify part of the size up when the CERT team comes to a home and there's clearly somebody that needs help. That team's going to do a size up. And if one of the things that they're identifying is there is an unfamiliar, unfriendly, frightened, or aggressive animal, that means we're not going in there. That means that what we're going to do is we're going to identify this home as needing higher level help. But we're not going to even enter and put ourselves in that situation.
Yeah, it is a good question, and quite frankly, you can try using something like an aggressive dog or on an aggressive dog pepper spray. What you might do is just make them that much more aggressive. Generally, with animals on the loose, that's hopefully a call in. If there's something dangerous in the area, then you are going to escalate that up through your leadership. Just follow your ICS, think of ICS and who it is you're reporting into, to say you've got a problem, especially if there's an aggressive dog on the loose that's out in the area there. So again, your safety's first. So very good question. You know, if that animal's on the loose, you want to get that radioed in, find out what it is you need to do, and then basically you might have to back off from that street if you can't get there at all. Your safety comes first. So, Morgan, I didn't know if there was.
No, so I think just as people are thinking about their plans, they have to know where they're going to evacuate with a pet. Most shelters now will have some accommodation, whether it's next door or
Yeah. So I know, Margaret, you kind of talked about, you know, me and disaster response. So myself, I've been a part of a CERT since 2008 and really getting a focus with animals starting in 2009. And I can tell you now, with what I've done in this last decade plus, is work towards what we have going on, not just in this county, but getting certified in a total of 6 counties in regards to disaster service worker, being a certified disaster service worker, or sworn in, I guess, as they would say it. My focus is with the animals working at shelters, or, you know, large animal shelter, small animal shelter. And I can tell you here in Contra Costa, Lake County, Napa, Solano, Sonoma, and Butte County are all set up to be able to take in animals. Not all of the places have teams that go out to get the animals, but a lot of them have mutual aid to have that happen. So there's a lot going on. So that's really good with regards to knowing, you know, if you are going out with your animal, that a lot of places already have some kind of plan in place and what they're going to do for where you're going to go and where it is your animal can stay. So again, just like with the people, you want to keep in mind, the food that you want there, keeping your animals healthy. I think one thing you don't think about with regards to the humans is if one thing to keep in the kit with your animals is maybe already have a lost animal poster already made up. So if your animal takes off during the disaster that happens, you've got at least a poster ready to get copied and out there for people to help you find your animal. So there's an example of something that you can have in your bag. And what's really good is having a picture of you with that animal. There are a lot of people, a lot of black dogs, black Labradors, you know, that are out there. Look for certain traits that are on your animal. You can always point those out, or at least be able to point them out when you try to go and search for your animal. It helps. Any distinguishing marks, always good to have. So I don't know if there were any questions, but again, the takeaways here being the pets matter because people matter. It's a good combination there in making sure we're taking care of the 4-legged, and well, I guess if you think of birds, 2-legged or winged animals as well. So what you could do is look at what local animal response programs that there are. And as Margaret has stated, you'll find out in future classes coming up here with your CERT response, what we do with regards to what forms are being filled out, what's happening, and what we all do. If you are interested in doing more with just the animals, you can look at taking some extra FEMA courses, maybe joining an animal rescue group. I think here in Contra Costa County, they have the groups like ARF and stuff. At least that gives you animal handling experience, and especially working with animals that aren't familiar with you. So you can maybe get more comfortable yourself being around strange animals that are going from there. If you really want to get into it, then like I said, there's Contra Costa, what they call CERT, a county animal response team. So there's here in Contra Costa, but if you really want to get some, boots on the ground with some of the work, places like Napa, Butte County, Solano do a lot more responses than we do here in Contra Costa County. So they can really give you some of the training that you'd like to get to have. They're really good out there.
All right, thank you, Erica. Any questions anybody has about pet preparedness or the pets that we might encounter if we are helping somebody, helping a neighbor in a home?
Yeah, I have two things.
Hi, Brent.
Erica, thank you so much for your time. This is a fantastic presentation. The way you and Margaret were in sync was fantastic, by the way. Really appreciated that. In terms of the slip lead, I was looking at different ones, and they come in different diameters. Is there a recommended diameter that we should be looking at, or anything features for the slip lead?
I would say if you think you're going to deal with a lot of smaller animals, the 1/4 inch wide, the 1/4 inch round one would be fine. But usually a 3/4 inch one is pretty good to have. I have my leather one that I have is I think about a 3/4 inch one that I use, but I have another one that's maybe almost 1 inch, and it's a flat braided one, so it's a little bit different, and I use that one a lot. I have carpal tunnel, so some of the regular leads, the leads that are out there, bother my hands. I feel like I have a better grip with the leather or the braided ones that I have. That work really well. So maybe if I'm available, what is it, Margaret, March 18th, I'll try to bring the different slip leads that I do utilize.
That'd be great.
That are out there.
Thank you. I really appreciate the thorough answer. The second thing, when it comes to dealing with the animals, is there anything that we should ask that we don't know to ask? It's one of those things where I know it's not just we're going to be dealing with cats and dogs. You might be dealing with the birds, reptiles. I know in my area, there's also horse owners as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, well, one thing we won't be doing is transporting horses. That is, the large animals are a completely different thing. So really the focus with our CERT team right now is just what we would call the small animals. So you're looking at the dogs, the cats, the pocket pets, the birds, that kind of stuff. Getting into horses and other large animal livestock, and that would include, like pigs and things like that. I can only recommend that the people understand and know that their animals, where it is they need to go if they're going to evacuate, that they have a plan in place. And hopefully most of those animals know how to be trailered. I know with the other counties that I do respond with, that is still a big problem, because someone, the horse is out in their field the whole time. They've never had to really trailer them. The vet comes to them. They don't take him anywhere. So the first time this horse or donkey might be trailered is when there's a fire in the background. And that really takes some kind of skill to get those animals in. And then sometimes all you're doing is, if you're leaving that animal behind, you're making sure it just has food and water. And again, that documentation. And what happens is knowing what animal, and that's why documentation is important, because when animals are left behind, and even with the people, then those with the right experience are going in and they can either shelter in place with the animals, or you have the right evacuation teams that have the right training to be able to pull those animals out.
Erica, didn't you tell me
there's a lot of extra training?
One of the fires you activated in last year or the year before, there were cowboys that were specifically designated to go after livestock and in wildfire areas.
Well, when you get into more like large ranching, especially for cattle and things like that, you're looking at the Department of Agriculture that is pulling, you know, that kind of thing out. And usually what they're doing is just trying to move the cattle or the herds from field to field, you know, but more for the smaller ones I've dealt with where we've had llamas, alpacas, we've had the pigs, and we've had the goats, the lamb, the sheep. I mean, we've had it, and it does take a certain kind of training to be able to bring those animals in. So I've done, I don't always work the evac team, but I do radio comms, and I work the large and small animal shelter. I do the intake. So I do a lot of the paperwork to help with people that are coming in and bringing in their animals.
So just to give everybody a general idea, in the event that in Walnut Creek, we had to have an evacuation, let's say due to wildfire, the city is going to attempt to set up a temporary evacuation point, which is a place where they have an intake of cars to tell people what resources, what locations, where they have to go, that kind of thing. When they have, if a shelter has to be set up, because now in these day and time, sometimes, you know, a lot of people evacuating, they have somewhere else to go, but it's the people who don't have another place to go that end up in the temporary shelters that are set up, and the American Red Cross would come and help us with that. But in addition to that, Contra Costa County Animal Control, combined with CART, which is that Contra Costa County Animal Rescue Team, those people are going to come and they're going to help with the evacuation process. Erica and people who are part of Walnut Creek CERT who have a particular training and affinity with animal and animal rescue are going to band together, and they're going to help with those two other organizations to make sure that animals that come with their evacuated owner are well documented and are cared for within the capability that we set up. And in addition, as everyday CERTs, if we're on a search and rescue team, we just need to understand how to help the owner or the injured owner stay in contact with their pet, to make sure that we document so nobody loses their pet, and that their pets get to a holding area. Throughout Walnut Creek CERT, in our caches, we have some limited animal equipment, and our animals folks in Walnut Creek CERT have done a really good job of creating documentation, having extra things like bowls and leads and carriers. And so we would be likely there would be some consolidated area where that takes place, or two consolidated areas, and we'd be drawing on those supplies to the extent that we can. So just to give you a step back, when we talk about light search and rescue, we're going to talk about the rescue of humans, but we want to make sure that you understand the importance of preparing your pets for a disaster so it doesn't become a secondary problem.